Rick Schwartz and Howard New run a conference every year called Traffic. In October, they host this event in beautiful Florida and award the industry's most cherished awards. In 2004, they started the awards, and today we have the very first Domainer of the Year joining us. Stay tuned to learn why he was inducted and how his domain name activities have changed over the past decade. 3 messages before today's show. First, if you're a domain name investor, don't you have unique legal needs that require domain name technical know-how and industry experience? That's why you need David Westlow of Wiley Ryan. Go search for David Westlow on Domain Sherpa, watch his interviews, and you can see for yourself that he is intelligent and articulate, can help you with buy-sell agreements, deal with website content issues and UDRP actions, and can even help you write your website terms and conditions. David Westlow is the lawyer to call for all your internet and intellectual property needs. See for yourself at newmediaip.com. Second, when you have questions about domain names, where should you go to ask them? The answer is dnforum.com. Not only is DN Forum the largest domain name forum in the world, but it's the best. You can learn about domain names in the industry, buy and sell domain names, talk about domain name news, and meet other domainers just like yourself. Register for a free DN Forum account and begin advancing your skills and knowledge today. And when you do sign up, send me a friend request so we can connect. My ID is Domain Sherpa. Finally, whenever I'm thinking of buying or selling a domain name, the very first place I go is estabat.com. Their service provides quick and comprehensive information about the valuation and the critical factors that you need to know about, like other extensions that are reserved, recent sales, search volume, and cost per click rates on search engines. And if you haven't tried their lead generator service for domains you want to sell, you're missing one of the most powerful tools around. Those are the reasons I pay for the service every month. Here's your program. Hey everyone, my name is Michael Seiger and I'm the publisher of DomainSherpa.com, the website where you come to learn how to become a successful domain name entrepreneur and investor directly from the experts. Today we're joined by Richard Lau. We're very fortunate to have a domain name entrepreneur and investor on the show who has done a tremendous amount in his career. He founded and ran one of the top 30 registrars in the world. He's amassed a domain name forensic background and rescued many high-value stolen domains such as rl.com, god.com, religion.com, and others. And he's currently operating multiple online businesses with generic category killer domain names. Richard, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
There's so much to talk about with respect to your background, what your businesses are currently working on. For those that are relatively new to the domain name industry, there's a lot that they can learn, and we only have 45 minutes, so I appreciate your time. And I'm going to apologize to anyone who knows Richard and wants him to talk about a specific subject in detail. Post your comments below, and I promise to ask Richard to come back on the show for a second interview. But let's start with where you are now, Richard, and then we'll go back in time. You've got a large portfolio. We know you've been in the industry for a long time. If you had to pick your top 3 favorite undeveloped domain names that are just being parked right now or don't even resolve, what would you think those 3 would be?
You know, I love category killing domains. I love generic domains. Some of the ones that pop out to me are ocean.com. You know, it's just such a beautiful brand, and it's just waiting to be developed. It's not a category killer like one of the developed ones we have, which is resume.com. But something that is a category killer that we haven't developed yet is hockey.com. It's a fantastic domain. You know, hockey is not going to be renamed at any time in the near future. One of my favorites is actually a .net, which is music.net. And, you know, the other one is also a .net is in.net, which stands for India.
in.net.
Yeah.
Huh.
So we've got some big plans for that as well. But those are all undeveloped, just sitting, you know, so many great properties to develop on, and only so many resources and time.
And I want to ask you about how you manage your resources and your time. But And I'm going to ask you about .nets too, because you seem to have a pretty large .net portfolio. But let me ask you first, of the domain names that you've developed, which are the ones that your favorites? You know, clearly people pick the ones that they think could be the best businesses or get up and running quickly and start earning revenue. Which ones do your businesses operate that are up and running that are some of your favorites?
I really like Babelfish. It's our online translation, fully functioning language translation website that has a great story behind it as well. But we've got others such as onlineradiostations.com. iWhois is one of my favorites, even though it doesn't generate a lot of revenue, but it's one that I used. It's kind of like the shaver ad. It's one that I used. I loved it so much I went out and we bought it.
I think it's the hair club for men.
Yes. So don't need that just yet. But,
yeah, so let me ask you about Babelfish, because I was on the internet back in the good old days, and I used to use Alta Vista all the time, and Babelfish, I believed, was owned by Babelfish was owned by Alta Vista?
That's a common misconception.
Okay.
It was babelfish.digital.com, and then Alta Vista bought digital, and so then it was babelfish.altavista.com.
Uh-huh.
Then Alta Vista got purchased by Yahoo.
Right.
And so then it was babelfish.yahoo.com. But it was never babelfish.com.
Right. They never actually used the domain name that they owned.
So babelfish.com was never owned by Alta Vista, Digital, or Yahoo. Babelfish.com has always been its standalone website.
Okay.
And so it was actually launched as a full-service translation website. I think the owner's name, or the guy who was running it, was Omar. And, that never took off, in terms of an offline language translation service. So it came available, and we purchased it. And, we put onto the site what people were wanting. I mean, Babelfish...
What people expected.
Yeah, before Alta Vista, Babelfish was language translation. It's a character from, or an animated character from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Mm-hmm. So it's not a product or a brand that Alta Vista or Digital or Yahoo came up with.
Right.
And Yahoo doesn't even use that brand anymore.
Right.
So it's been great for us. We are putting onto the site what people are looking for. It's got a great memorability. The old school guys,
right? Remember it? It's branded. Yeah. And how do you generate revenue from Babelfish.com?
It's all AdSense revenue. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we've had some toolbar for language translation toolbars just to make it easier to translate an entire web page. Mm-hmm. But most of the revenue is from Google. Google is a great partner.
Excellent. All right, and we'll talk about iWhois as well. But you mentioned a couple of .nets, some great .nets, IN.net, Music.net. In looking through some background documents about yourself and in your domains, I've noticed there are a lot of .nets. Do you feel like you have a very heavy .net portfolio?
Yes, there are mixed feelings on .net because you've got all the new GTLDs coming out. The new GTLDs, I think they will have a following. They have a place. I think that as more and more new GTLDs come out, the .com version of whatever gets registered does increase in value. The domains like .net, .org, .biz, .info, they have a danger of falling in value. The great thing about .nets versus a .biz or a .info is that it stands for network, right? So one of my companies is Ocean Networks, Inc. And so that operates under ocean.net. Mm-hmm. It's a perfect fit. We've got a model.net. So to operate a modeling network, it makes sense that it would be model.net. Mm-hmm. Having it, if the domain.net fits with the business concept, then it's a perfect fit. And it actually retains its value, or the value goes up.
Right.
So that's what we have for for India.net, the plan is to create obviously a large Indian network.
Yeah.
So.
Excellent. So I'm going to go back in time now, and I want to figure out how you got to where you are today with operating businesses, with websites that are based on advertising, with, we talked prior to the show that you're doing some leasing, with the investments that you've done. I want to figure out how you got here, because a lot of people are entering the industry today or tomorrow, and it's not as clear how you can become successful. How did you first become interested in the domain name industry?
Wow, we only have 45 minutes. Usually,
I know.
Usually that's a 3-hour discussion that starts at 11 p.m. and ends at 2 a.m. I can give you the short version, which is I was involved in a paging business, and one of the partners in the business left to create an internet dial-up business. And I was friends with some of the guys that were working for him. Friends. We're all young guys working together, and they actually started registering generic domains and told me about it. They registered icecream.com. I mean, it was really way back there. 1995, 1996.
Yeah. And
so I registered with a friend. We're like, hey, what is this internet thing? And, what is HTML? It looks like, WordPerfect.
Right.
Most people today would not remember what WordPerfect is, but it was a hypertext markup language. And so we wanted to play around with it. And so we registered a gaggle of domains. Just, back then, you could register domains and you would receive an invoice from the internet, and then you could decide which ones to keep. You'd send in the check, and the other ones would just get auto-deleted.
Right.
So we registered a whole bunch of domains around auto dealers. And so we had this concept of going to a local auto dealer and putting his inventory online, and that could be our experiment of getting our feet wet on building a website. And shortly after we had registered these domains, Microsoft called us and said, hey, we're interested in one of your domains. And I'd done it with a friend, and I was busy with the paging business. And so he was the one dealing with Microsoft. And it had been a couple months, and I was like, whatever happened to that? Did we sell to them? Or like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And he said, well, no, I want $50,000, and, they want to offer us $2. So...
This was way back when that you guys wanted $2,000 for a domain name that you're paying $100 a year. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, so I was like, let me call and just step in and let's see what's going on. So I called the guy at Microsoft and I'm like, look, I'd like to buy a car. So tell me what your PO is. What's your PO limit? And he's like, $10,000. I'm like, perfect, $9,500. Do we have a deal? And he said, absolutely. Just right on the spot. He was like, absolutely, but it's just subject to a trademark search. They do a trademark search. It turns out there's a trademark owner in Toronto, Canada. So it killed it, but it made for an amazing story. Right? Yeah. I at the time, I was at the paging business, so it was either talk about pagers or talk about this new business, right? This new internet. Yeah. And so because of that story, which went nowhere with Microsoft, but because of that, people started coming to me and saying, hey, how do I register a domain? And so I set up a website where people could search for a domain name, fill in their information, and hit submit. And I wanted to get free lunches. That was my idea. It was like, hey, I'll put $19.95 on there, but I got no way of collecting the money. So I had a lander that had the $19.95 crossed out and put 0 and put that under a subfolder called Friends. Right. So if you went to at the time domainsdirect.com/friends, you could search for a domain, register it, and you would then receive a paper invoice from the internet, right? Which was separate. Right. But at the time, your ISP would charge you $100 to $200 for them to go through the process of searching for a domain name and registering it on your behalf.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
So
you were offering that search part for free.
For free, for friends.
Yeah.
And so then, I set up this website in my spare time, so on the weekends, and it was really just a mail-to form. Right. And so then I got a couple of emails from people saying, dear, owner, they looked up my information and they were like, we've used your service, we've registered the domain name, we've received our bill from the internet, but how do we pay you the $19.95? I was like, people are actually using the main page.
Right.
There's no way of collecting. There was no payment information because I had no, I still had a job and I had a fiduciary duty to that job. And
right.
So, fast forward a little bit. I replied to those saying, "Oh, it's just good karma,"
This one's on me. Yeah.
So then when the paging business ended, I took a look at this and I was like, there's something here. And so then I launched yournamefree.com, which was it was that, but I got it listed in Yahoo under the directory service. It wasn't a search engine back then; it was a directory, and offered email forwarding and website forwarding for a one-time fee of $49. And I had an ISP who would set that up for $10. And at the time I could only accept Visa. So I just collected all of the MasterCard's information and put them to the side. And then after about 7 months, I think, it took me to get MasterCard approval. Then I went back, and anyone who was still using it, I then charged them $49.
Yeah.
Sent them an email saying, "Oh, we forgot to charge your card." But that's how I got into the business.
Too funny.
And I don't know how that relates to people that are getting in today, but it's just like, you put out a service that people want. You start with your friends and family, and you just go from there.
Yeah. So basically, you undercut the competition in price, and by doing so and in investing your time, you were able to learn a little bit more about the industry and what people had an interest in, what people were willing to pay for, even though you didn't collect money at times. Right. And it helped you determine what was of value and what you might want to run in the future.
Exactly.
And in that case, you ran namesdirect.com, yournamefree.com, and you also had mydomain.com. Is that correct?
That's correct. So I started Your Name Free and all from scratch, and then we were partnered with existing registrars. And so then we decided, well, let's set up our own registrar. So that was Names Direct. Okay. And so we were one of the first, I think it was the first 30 registrars that were accredited when VeriSign was split into to Network Solutions and VeriSign. And then we actually purchased mydomain.com from Eric Woodward. And that was one of the largest free DNS services in the world. And it was hosting 500,000 domain names. And so we bought that, and we used it as a soft sell to Names Direct.
Right.
Providing free email forwarding, URL forwarding services. And the soft sell was, hey, since you're here anyway managing your domain name, why don't you let us have the renewal?
Gotcha. So it was a loss leader. You paid for the infrastructure for that. You brought the people in who wanted something free, and then while you had them there, you upsold them on registration or moving their domains over to you or what have you.
Exactly. And we grew that business to about 100,000 domain names. That was after we merged with NameZero, based in California.
And you merged, so you started those companies in 1998, and then you merged with NameZero in 2001. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so when you merged, does that mean it's a bringing together of equals, or did they buy you out but you called it a merger, or did you buy them out? How did that work?
It was a mix. I had moved to Bermuda at the time, and so when you depart Canada, the tax guy takes a look and says, okay, well, we think you're worth X dollars, so therefore your tax bill is, Y. And so we moved to Bermuda, and boy, it was a dizzying trip because we landed, GoDaddy launched, Two Cows came out. The price dropped from $35 a year to $15 a year. And so we went from making money to not making money, but we had a tax bill based on making money. And then almost immediately I was diagnosed with colon cancer. And I had a 3-month-old, no life insurance,
wow,
this outstanding tax bill. And then I was in the emergency room and our Your Name Free website was hacked, and they wiped the servers. So it was, when it rains, it pours, and it was just torrential.
Yeah.
So, fast forward, it was stage A, so I just had surgery. But a lot of miracles, I thank God for what happened at that point in my life. And, it came out of it. The doctor said, you need to stop working. I was working probably 80 to 100 hours a week.
Wow.
Many nights I wouldn't go to sleep, just work all night. And so I needed to merge, and I had this tax bill hanging over me, and I was concerned, about my family. So I didn't know if I would still make it out, from the shadow of cancer. So I did a deal with Name Zero where, it was part cash to pay off almost all of the taxes that were due, and it was part paper stock, and then it was part IOU. And that they owed us some money. So, I moved to California, and it was a real break. Going down to a 40-hour work week was like a vacation. And living in California,
right, sun's always shining, the beaches are right around the corner. Yeah, it's like you're rejuvenated. Only working 40 hours a week, you have a whole nother lifetime to spend.
I was moving there from Bermuda, but I'd only been to the beach in Bermuda probably half a dozen times in a year.
Huh.
So to go to California and kind of get my life back, get some rest in, and just kind of look after my health while working, having somebody else work on the business was a real relief.
Yeah.
Fast forward a year, Name Zero started to have its own troubles, and so the value of the overall company had plummeted. And so really the assets of value were the assets that I had brought in. And so those got sold off, but I was a shareholder in the entire company, not just in my own assets. So after that, I moved back to Vancouver and really got a severance check. But they say the best revenge is living well. So it was just like dust myself off, talk to the guys on Rick Schwartz's board. I had to put my hat out. If Rick Schwartz didn't have a message board, I wouldn't be sitting here today.
Huh.
So
Why is that?
I've been invited in to Rick Schwartz's message board by Kevin Sinclair.
Yep.
And he had said, there's a lot of guys on here that use your service. My domain, it was a free service.
Yeah.
Domainers love free services. And so I would just hop on and search for mydomain.com, and I would answer anyone that had an issue or a complaint. And
you would hop onto Rick's board, and anybody that had an answer or a complaint or a question or a complaint, you would address.
Yeah. So I was just offering high-level customer service.
Sure.
And so after Name Zero, I went on to the message board and I said, guys, teach me what you guys do, because you guys work from home. I've just come from managing 65 employees. I'm jealous.
Right.
Tell me what you do and how you do it. And, Steven Sachs, he took me under his wing. He's like, have you heard of the Overture tool? You can plug in a domain name and it will correlate against the type-in traffic. And this is how you can determine what a domain, this is when, this is brand new information.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I jumped in with both feet. And, I had nothing to lose. I was still, it was 2 years after cancer. I still was under the shadow. And so I just went for it. And
so at this point in your career, you have a ton of knowledge about the way the domain name industry works because you ran a registry. So you understood every process along the cycle. You had purchased some domain names, but most of your time, it sounds like, was tied up in your registrar, in mydomain.com, in namesdirect.com, in yourfreename.com that was sold to or merged with Name Zero. And so when that imploded and you lost, and your, the money that you got went to your tax bill, it sounds like you're starting at ground zero again. Did you have money in the bank? Did you have domain names that you then use? How did you, so that's sort of the place where I think domain name investors come in today. I'm at ground zero.
Yes. So I was at sub-zero. because I came back to Vancouver. Everyone slapped me on the back because they see, I've gone to Bermuda, I've gone to California, lived in the Valley, I'm coming back.
Good.
I'm like, yeah,
Yeah,
good.
you merged, you sold a company, you had an exit. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it looks that way from the outside, but on the inside, when you peel back, you pull back the curtains,
Right.
I got a severance check, and I'm back in the same place I was when I left. I'm back in the same condo, and so my wife at this point is looking at it saying, this domain stuff is not working out, right? But at the same time, I've got these guys on Rick's board, and I'm reading the board now. I was addicted. I just had it open, and I was just reading every new post that came in.
Yeah.
And I have nothing but praise for Rick for having that. He's used the analogy of his living room. Well, it was like I was sleeping on his couch. I was in there all day, every night, just reading. And the guys that it was a real family. You're competitors, but once you have a domain, you can share the information on how to make money, or giving advice on how you find domain names. And so I took my credit cards and I purchased domain names on my credit cards. This is like a magazine. This is like an article you see in Entrepreneur magazine. But I used credit cards to buy domain names because my wife, no holds barred, said you cannot touch the little cash that we do have on this wild goose chase. It doesn't work for us. But I wanted to try the information that Stephen and others were sharing. And so I took $5,000 on my credit cards and I purchased domain names.
And this was in what year?
This was in 2002.
2002. Okay.
So I bought domains on auction.
So what kind of names would you buy for $5,000, and roughly how much were you paying per name?
I bought names as low as $75, up into the couple $100. But what I was looking for is domain names where someone else was already on. At the time, it was called goto.com. Right. Today's equivalent would be Google. But people who were on goto.com and they had a domain name, a keyword that they were going after, and I could have a domain name that I could purchase on auction and sell to them. So I was flipping the domains as quickly as I could get them in. And then I had one domain. I can't say what it is because it's under NDA, but I had one domain which I was able to purchase on auction for $75. I connected up, and it was getting 1,000 visits a day. I was like, wow. So and I'm thinking, well, instead of selling it, why don't I sell the traffic? So I found out how much these guys were paying for keyword, cost per click. And one guy said, I'll pay you $50 a day. And I was like, bonanza, And this is probably 3 weeks in. So, a lot of luck.
So now you're starting to get some cash flow to put against the credit card advance that you just took.
Now my wife.
Your wife's not divorcing you.
I'm going to be able to pay off the credit card bill because of this. And at the same time, because I knew about all the registries and registrars and how Whois worked, I knew that a lot of people were putting in misleading information. But I was able to look at, using the tools that were out there, domain tools, Intellius, and just try and find out what the real contact information was of the owners. So I started to not buy on the auction sites because they did start to ramp up right around that time, and instead go to try and track down owners of domain names that I could see were under monetized.
Right.
Not necessarily that were coming up for expiration, because there were a lot of guys also doing that, but just domains that had no landing page.
Yeah. So domains that were good, that had a good amount of search volume on goto.com's search tool at the time, but either didn't resolve, or they just had a cheap personal website up, or that just weren't being used to their full revenue potential.
Right.
And so if they didn't have the contact information on the who is, you would, or the full contact information, if it didn't have like the proper phone number, you might look up their name and their address or their city and Intellius and pay money to actually find their information and then contact them.
Yeah, I read a book. It was about a skip tracer, and that's an old term. That's from the 80s or 70s, and that's someone who tracks down, works for a collections agency, and tracks down people who have skipped out on a payment. And this guy, he was a skip tracer, and he was using his tools and knowledge in skip tracing to track down abducted children. Usually taken by a non-custodial parent. And so as I'm reading the book, I'm like, I think there's some connection here to what I'm somewhat doing in the domain business. And so I use some of his tricks and tips to kind of widen my net and not be afraid to pick up the phone and just trying to hunt for someone using their first name, right? You call someone who you think might be the brother of the owner. And you're like, hey, it's Richard. I'm calling from Canada. I'm looking for David. Is he there? And because you're calling casually, they think you must know him, right?
Right.
And it worked, and so I was able to land some very interesting sales. I established strong relationships with advertisers that I was leasing and renting domain names to. This is back in probably 2003, and then I became kind of their agent. I was their buyer agent, but instead of selling them the domains, I just added them to my portfolio and continued to lease the traffic to them on a zero-click model.
Yeah.
Now we call it zero click.
Right. Back then it was
just redirecting. And I had at the time, because I had let go of my domain. It was merged in with Name Zero. Name Zero then ended up selling it to Dotster, which I think now is domain.com. I had a very heavy NDA and non-compete, and so I had written Domain Manager. We used completely different software. I just wanted there to be no possibility that someone could say, hey, you took the code from my domain. So we used all new software and different platforms. Instead of using TinyDNS, we used Bind. Instead of using Oracle, we used MySQL, etc.
Yeah.
And in there, I had the counters. I was using this for my own portfolios. And then after the non-compete ended, then I opened it up to domainers to use. And a lot of people loved it.
And it's still open till this day. So I can go on to Domain Manager and it appears for free. I can manage my DNS, manage my email forwarding, things like that.
Yeah, so I'm in an advisory role in that now. That's owned by Sam Dennis in Toronto. But I'm still actively involved on the advisory, especially on the new features. But yeah, it's a free model, and eventually it'll be freemium. But until then, it's got unbelievable features packed in for free.
So many things I want to ask you about here, Richard. I've got to pick and choose. It's a phenomenal story. So buying domain names on a credit card, on the drop, understanding who is paying for that traffic on Overture, because that's what the tool was at the time. It just showed you who was buying that advertising and how much search was happening for that phrase. Do you think any of that is reproducible today at the same magnitude that you were seeing back in 2002?
I think so, because I'm in my 40s now. So, and I've got two wonderful kids. I got my wife, who I love, and just I work from home. I'm comfortable, so I don't have it in me to work 12, 15 hours a day. But you get the young guys, and they do, and there's so many tools that are out there and available, much more than was available when I started. And so I think that the plethora of information that's available and advice and friendly competition that's available now I wish I was starting now instead of back then. So it's, a lot of people say, oh, it's too late to start. You guys had it back then. There are, you take a group of 12 people that were in the domain industry in 1996, and 10 of them are still working 9-to-5 jobs. Only 2 of them have become successful domainers. So it's the same today. I truly believe that, if you just absorb all the information from all of the bloggers, Elliot, Domain Shane, yourself, Morgan, and as well as the domain forums. There's just so much information out there that you need to immerse yourself in, educate yourself, treat it like a school, and then you can see what your specialty is. My specialty was tracking down people who didn't want to be found. And so then it was only me making them a low ball offer.
Right.
That worked for me. Merlin Kaufman, I had to share you the story of how I met him. On Rick's board, I was known for being able to track down people who owned domain names previously. So if there was a stolen domain name, it was like, hey, let's ask Richard. Let's see what's going on. And someone nudged me and said, hey, this guy Merlin, he's ending up with some fantastic domains that they're expiring or just about to expire, or they've expired and they're just about to be deleted, and he's ending up with these names. Like, they're not going to auction, so he must be stealing them. And so, and I see this ad, it was I think it was a Domainer magazine, print copy, and there's an ad of Merlin with his smiling face saying, hey, I'm Merlin, you want to talk domains, contact me. And I'm like, who's this kid? He's 18 years old, he's got domains that are worth tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And so before I contacted Merlin, I'm contacting the previous owners. I've been given a short list by another member. And so I'm investigating, and I'm finding it hard to contact some of these guys, but not too difficult.
Yeah.
I track them down on the phone. I get them, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we know Merlin." I'm like, "Well, so what happened here?" Because
yeah, they weren't pissed off that that Merlin guy.
Yeah, and I'm like, we're interested in finding out more about this before we make an offer on the domains, and they're like, "Oh yeah, well, we talked to Merlin, and he seemed like a really good kid, and yeah, we just paid for the renewal and gave it to him."
What?
I almost fell over, but I didn't want to make them feel badly for having done the thing. So I didn't want to say to them, "You just gave him a $10,000 domain name that you paid for the renewal on, and gave it to him." Merlin is a charming guy, and that's his specialty.
How the heck did he convince somebody to pay for a renewal and give him a domain name that was worth tens of thousands of dollars?
It's unbelievable. So if you haven't done an interview with Merlin, you got to get him on. And so then finally, I go back to the member who had asked me to investigate Merlin. I'm like, I can't believe it. Like, if someone was telling me this, I wouldn't believe it. But I'm the investigator here. I've never spoken to Merlin. This is what's happened. So I got to beat this guy.
That is hilarious. All right, I'm going to get Merlin on, and we're going to find out how he actually did that. So if somebody were entering the domain industry today, Richard, they had $10,000 or $20,000 that they wanted to start investing. Yes, they need to go read all the blogs. Yes, Elliot, Morgan, Domain Shane, they all have great tips to share. What do you think is a great area to look at for somebody that's considering investing, knowing that everybody has their sort of specialties?
I think that if you take people that have, say you take a dozen domainers across the United States, they got $10,000 each, and they're equally talented, and they're willing to put in the time.
Yeah.
Then I would say, well, what's going to differentiate each other from them is the location that they're currently in. So I would say take a look at the geos that are in your area. So if you live in San Diego, then maybe pick a vertical that you know. Maybe it's dentists, maybe it's auto mechanics, but pick a vertical that you know and concentrate on the geo in that vertical or in a number of different verticals. And then get to know the bricks and mortar companies and become a buyer's agent for them.
Right.
So help them either expand their domain portfolio, get a better domain, put them in connection with building a better website. Even if they have a domain that they're happy with, figure out what help they need, and then hang your shingle out as the domain guy. And then when they're talking to someone and say, oh well, you're a brand new dentist, or you're a brand new auto, or they find somebody else in their circle that you're not going to be able to touch. They'll be like, oh, I know who you should talk to. This guy can help you get set up with a website and a domain name. You can't register a domain name for free anymore, right? You're paying a reg fee. Everyone now knows that to get a decent domain, you have to pay for it. So become that buyer's agent in your locale for some specific niches.
Yeah.
And, you have to pass on that you're passionate about domain names. And that's what people will remember. But you also want to be helpful, even to people that have an existing domain, so that they remember you as the guy to go to. Because they want to be able to seem like they're an expert to their friends.
Right. Great advice. What investment or business have you made or have you run in the past where you felt like it taught you the most about the domain name industry?
Interesting. I mean, there's so many lessons that I've learned in everything. But I think my days of running the registrar, that really, it was long hours and it was difficult work, and domainers are demanding individuals. And so I would get calls 24 hours a day. And because I was selling the tools, right? I was providing the shovels. And, I would get faced with all kinds of different challenges that people were facing, whether it was selling a domain, developing the domain, they're having a problem with setting up their domain. And then I've got that on the domainer side, and then I've got, the IP protection, dealing with lawyers, dealing with the FBI, dealing with local police, dealing with Visa, MasterCard. That was probably the biggest learning that I've done. But then going out to domain conferences and actually shaking hands with people, breaking bread with them, and just learning from people over meals and just building the relationship. Yeah, that is. You just cannot downplay the value of meeting people.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement. And I've only been going to conferences for a couple of years since I've been in the domain name industry, Richard. When am I going to see you at a conference? And which conference?
When I started, I went to the very first traffic show. I'm not even sure if we had called it traffic back then, but that was at the Beverly Hills in, was it the Four Seasons in Beverly Hills? And really, it was just back-to-back meetings with a couple of presentations from Fabulous.
Right.
And there were business opportunities that came out of a breakfast. I'm sat down next to a guy, and we end up trading domain names because we're at breakfast together. And that's not something that you're going to be able to do on a forum.
No, you're not.
And so, I went to, there was actually one other conference before that was a domain conference put on in New York, but it was a tiny, tiny domain conference. But I found that you going to the conferences, going to the ICANN meetings, and just meeting with people and building your network. What I was able to do, and what I think people still can do to this day, is you build your network. And you're not only in it for yourself, you're in it for your network. So when someone comes to me, I had an example. Oversea a few years ago came to me and said, we've been trying to buy a domain from Yan Yi, but he doesn't reply to us. I'm like, well, they know that Yan Yi's been to my house for a barbecue, so I can call Yun, right? And so then I negotiate a deal between the two of them. That's something that only happens because you're building and servicing your network.
Right.
And sometimes you do a deal and you get something for it. Sometimes you do a deal and you don't. But as long as you have the best intentions of the network when you're putting the people together, you can only win. Because even if you don't get something on that deal, they'll remember you and include you on the next deal.
Yeah.
So that's really something that I would encourage a newbie to do. It's kind of the advice of if you've lost your job, buy a suit and go hang out at the country club. That was back in the 70s. I don't know if that's still true today. But it's who you know.
Right.
And your network, as long as you're bringing passion and integrity to it, it will work out.
Yeah. So will you be at Traffic Vegas this May or maybe October in Florida? You thinking about either of those conferences?
I will. I am booked and registered for Traffic Las Vegas.
All right. I'll meet you there in person then.
Yeah.
It's going to be a great event. All right. I need to ask you about a couple more things. I want to talk about domainname.com, but first on your LinkedIn profile, there was an entry there that I can't just gloss over. I need to know about baitcar.com.
Okay.
Your profile says that you were a founding supporter. Isn't Baitcar that show that's on TV where they bring up the pimped out car in the middle of downtown LA, they leave the car running, they leave the doors open, and they wait for somebody to get in it, they close the doors, they start driving off, and then by remote control, they kill the car and they lock the car door, and there's a camera on the people the whole time. Is that what it is?
That's what it is, but the deal I did was far before the TV show.
Yeah.
So one of my best friends was running the Baitcar program up here in Canada, in BC, and I saw some of the videos, and he had the idea of putting it onto the web, and I said, well, you need to put it under baitcar.com, and Frank owned baitcar.com, so
Frank Schilling.
Yeah, Frank Schilling. And so I approached Frank and he said, well, if you make a donation to a charity of my choice, I'll donate the domain name to the program. And this is an excellent example of networking. I went to a non-domainer who owned Pier 1. I said, hey, we've got this social project that we want to do, and the RCMP has a budget of $0 for this. So, can you kick in some web hosting? And he said, not only will I kick in the web hosting, but I will find a developer.
Wow.
And so he went out and got a developer and brought them in. And so we developed this site, posted the videos that had been edited by the RCMP, and promoted baitcar.com. I mean, I see vans and posters around town promoting baitcar.com. And it's received millions and millions of visitors, and it's been featured on CNN, far beyond just Vancouver. But that played a pivotal role in reducing car theft in BC by 40%.
Wow.
Well, car theft isn't, to me, the reason that I was so passionate about it, and my friend really put me onto this, is stolen cars isn't just about property. It's about the guys who are dragged to death because they were trying to stop a stolen car when it was filling up for gas. It's about the guys who are in high-speed chases and kill an innocent bystander. So there's so much more that you can do, and you're using a domain name to do it.
Yeah.
And so that's a combination of domaining, networking, and social good. I'm involved in water school as well. I think that there's a lot that the domainers can bring, and I encourage everyone to get involved in, whether it's whatever charity it is. I encourage everyone to get involved in just making the world a better place.
Definitely. And you were very active in water school, the water school at thewaterschool.org in the past. Are you still on the board of directors for the water school?
Yeah, actually, about a year ago, I took over as executive director, and it's not a position I intend on holding permanently, but the founders were fantastic guys, and they wanted to retire, and so the board of directors we got more involved. I took over as executive director, and one of the other board members, he spends 12 weeks a year in Africa, no charge, pays his own way.
Wow.
We've got passionate people. And we've got over 60 people in Africa, Uganda, Kenya. We've got a sister organization in Haiti. Over 60 people on the ground training. And, we teach people how to disinfect water at point of use. So without using chemicals or without using filters, just using plastic water bottles.
Wow.
And the sun. So
Yeah.
it's UV light.
And you do it, and you provide clean water at the school, so it encourages kids to go to school, to get clean water, to get their education.
Right, and we want that to be passed out as well. We do village health teams that train in the village and in the slums as well. So they have it at home, they have it at school. And if the education system in Kenya, for example, and Uganda, it's free. So it's government paid, but if you're at home with dysentery or diarrhea, you can't go to school.
Right.
And so education is vitally important, and water is the foundation step for all of the other NGOs or charities or aid organizations to build on.
Right.
If the child doesn't survive past the age of 5, you're not going to be able to teach them.
Right.
Or help them. So it's one of the biggest challenges is water sanitation. So we have a focus on solar disinfection, but it's tied up in an entire program, an education program that covers health and sanitation and water disinfecting.
Yeah, well, it's a fantastic organization. I know I've talked to Greg McNair a number of times. He's always supporting it at the events, and they're lucky to have you as the executive director. Richard, I want to ask you about another Richard as well. In 2010, you and Richard Kirkendall bought domainname.com, the registrar, I believe, and customer base. Is that true?
Yes, that's right. So
you're currently part owner in another domain name registrar. You just couldn't stay away from it.
Actually, I'm well known for having started almost 100 registrars.
Wow.
Yeah, so domain name is one of them. But most of them are not fully retail registrars like domainname.com is. Most of them are shell registrars that are used for drop catching.
And how many shell registrars for drop catching do you currently operate today?
I have my fingers in 57.
Wow. So you're still actively collecting domain names on the drop?
So actually, no, there's a difference there. I am involved in running the companies, and then those are utilized by the likes of NameJet and SnapNames.
Oh, okay.
And so
so your companies operate the technology that others use to grab those domains.
Right. So if I want a domain, I still need to go and saddle up into NameJet, SnapNames, and submit my back order.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. All right. So why did you want to get back into retail registrar?
A lot of people look at domain names and it's sometimes you think, well, domain names, we've been doing this since 1998, 1996, all the domains are gone. We're still, I believe, on the infancy of domain names. And so, the new GTLDs that are coming out, a lot of people downplay it or poo-poo that, hey, you're not going to be able to be successful or only a few will survive. Not every single person has a domain name right now. And I believe that we'll have not only domain names for every single individual, but people will have multiple domain names. And every single company will have dozens of domain names. And I have to go back to one of the first presentations I did at a local conference. It was a marketing conference, and it was internet marketing, and one of the sessions that I was brought in on was talking about domain names, and I was the only person talking about domain names at a 3-day internet marketing conference, and it was mostly to big corporations, and the Hewlett Packard's, Xerox, it was a lot of large players there, and so I was talking to the IT engineers. And so I was on my session then, because on the domaining, it wasn't the forefront of marketing back then. And so, I said, oh, how many people own one domain name? And almost everybody put up their hand. How many people own two? There was like a third. How many own three or more? And there was maybe 4 people in a room of 100. And so then I started talking about registering defensive domains. And I talked about the fact that, that there would be a secondary market where people would buy and sell domains. And you could have cut the tension. There was so much outrage at the thought that of the audacity of people buying a domain name and then selling it for more than the registration price. And I said, look, guys, we are the Wild West. We are selling land. The government is giving away the land for free. And eventually there's going to be corner lots. And those lots will go for a premium. And, it was interesting to kind of look back on that the secondary market, which today is the primary market. Right? If you are a business, you want to be taken seriously, you are going to need to buy a domain name.
Right.
Even if you launch on a .co or you launch on a word like Twitter with no E, you eventually will need to buy it. You might have to wait until you're successful and have money.
Right.
But you're going to need to buy your main domain. And so today, trying to look 5 years into the future, what will the internet look like in 5 years? Domain names, I believe, are here to say, yes, the apps will have an impact on it, but the number of people that are coming on far outweigh the decline by alternate use or by apps. So I do believe there's a tremendous amount of room for new GTLDs and for domain names for people and for things. So
here's the final question, Richard. Will those who own the .coms continue to have their assets rise in value because it will always be the de facto extension, even though all those other extensions will continue to be used because more businesses come online every year, more people want domain names, etc.?
Absolutely. I mean, I am a believer in the new GTLDs, but when someone launches, their barber whatever the new TLD is that they go with, so .xyz.
Yeah.
It will, and they launch and they become successful, and you're sitting down, you hear a radio ad, go to visit us at Barber XYZ. People will still type in barberxyz.com. Or they'll just type in barber.com. It's just ingrained in us. And they won't, what I saw in the early days was people would type in barber.com, barber.net, barber.org, and barber.cctld, whatever their country they're in. Now I think that they will type in the .com, they'll type in the .ca, and they will type in the GTLD that is relevant to the use. Right? So that's where I come back to, hey, if you're operating a network, then they'll type in the .net.
Right.
If they're operating a something that's in the travel business, then they might type in barber.travel or barber.com, but then and barber.us or .ca or .de, but they won't really go beyond that. So I think that the value of CCTLDs and the value of .coms are going to go up. And I still think that there's a tremendous future from the new GTLDs, but I think that success of the new GTLDs will drive up the value of the .com, the CCTLD, and then the use-relevant other generic TLD, whether it be .net or .org.
Right. All right, Richard, still so many other things I want to ask you about. I want to be conscious of your time. You've given us a lot. I'm going to ask you to come back another time. We'll talk about forensics and how you tracked down phenomenal domain names and helped with god.com or religious.com, and how you actually got rl.com back, which is currently listed as you as the registrant or one of your companies. And we'll also talk about face.com, which was an interesting story, and maybe I'll have some more information next time around. If nothing else, I'll see you in May in Las Vegas. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person. Richard, if people want to say thank you to you for having come on the show, for having shared your insights around what to do now if they're an investor, or how to focus locally, or just for the great stories that you told, what's the best way that they can do that? Are you on Twitter? Do you...
I find the best is I really like having LinkedIn, and so if I would encourage people, I'll give you my link. Just contact me through LinkedIn, and I'm always game for opening up and building my network. So I invite everyone to contact me.
All right, we'll put your LinkedIn connection on there. Richard Lau, domain investor extraordinaire, I thank you. I want to be the first to thank you for coming on the show, sharing the details of your industry knowledge and experience, and thanks for being a domain Sherpa.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.